What's good, y'all? My name is Darius, and this time I'm back with something completely different. I'm not really going to go through the whole thing with Warframe, what I do, a general playthrough of the game and stuff like that. But this time I'm going to actually show some of the mechanics in the game because I know in reality the game is, pretty difficult to get around. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Because I know there's a bunch of stuff about the game that it's kind of weird depending. Let me just turn that down just a little bit. And I know there's some stuff in the game that needs to, it needs to be explained because I know a bunch of different things that happened prior, which is, crossplay and various other things as well. Let me just do this real quick. But yeah, right now, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually teach how the various things in the game is. And the three things I was going to focus primarily on is the warframes, the weapons, and the mods themselves. And as usual, if you guys haven't done so, be sure to join my Guilded server, as pretty much every single piece of information I mentioned here will be there as well. Now, with that out of the way, let's just jump right into it. Now, I know Warframe is pretty dense and a bunch of numbers and everything that goes on, and I might do a mission while I'm here as well. But yeah, Warframe is pretty dense in terms of gameplay and a bunch of other stuff that goes on. So naturally, you'll get easily confused as there's a bunch of things that happen, such as like bullet jumping, parkour, weapon stats, elements, everything. Just about everything you can think of in this game is pretty much going to, throw you for a loop. And the one thing I am going to do is teach you some of the realistic mechanics in the game that you should learn and you should know prior to playing the game. Since crossplay is, well, it's not fully out since it's not true crossplay. We can actually play with several players on different platforms. So we don't have to we don't have to be on the same platform to play with one another. So you can play with PC players, you can play with Xbox players, which I'm on. You can play with Switch, and you can play with PS4. So yeah, and to kick things off, I'm going to start off with the actual Warframes themselves, which are basically the battle proxies. The thing about the Warframes is that there's over 51 Warframes pretty much in the game right now. With Styanax was one of the recent Warframes that came up before, and we just recently got Varuna, which is her right here. And naturally, because we got a new Warframe, you want to know about the different stats of the different frames and how they impact your gameplay. So naturally, right now I'm in the Arsenal, which is where I can, switch my Warframe, my weapons, and various other things as well. I'm not going to get into these because this is pretty much spoiler territory, and I don't want to go too far into it. And I want to keep things simple as to just focus on the Warframe, the weapons, and the actual mods themselves. But naturally, when I hover my cursor, this thing right here, over one of the pretty much one of these options, I'll get a list of options on the right. For Warframes, it's a bit more simpler because there's a few things that you need to know about. Obviously, if I go to equip different Warframes, I can press A to equip different Warframes. On your platform, it could be completely different. On Nintendo, it might be B. On PlayStation, it might be the cross button. On mine, it's A. And I forget what it would be on PC, as I'm not familiar with PC as much. I mean, I only played this twice on PC, but that was it. This is pretty much the main console I play on. But anyway, more into the stats of the Warframes. The stats in Warframes are a bit different, and let me switch this out real quick. The stats in Warframe are a bit different based on how you view the frame itself. And I did speak more on this into, I think, one of the one-on-one guides. I don't think I have posted yet, but I may post it soon if I haven't yet. But just to understand, this is pretty much all the stuff for the Warframe in its entirety. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is the actual capacity. The capacity up at the top is pretty much your skill points. You use these skill points to equip these mods that are down here. And naturally, well, I'm going to speak more into the mods a bit later, but naturally, in order to equip the mods, you got to make sure your mod has the right amount of skill points that you can use to equip it. If you don't have the right amount of skill points, you can't equip the mod. And since Varuna is a pretty recent Warframe, naturally, I bought her from, Marketplace because I had a coupon, and I managed to get her Warframe from there. So I was able to, get her, as well as I was able to get, she comes preloaded with a free Warframe slot and a reactor, so I double her mod capacity. But I'll speak more on that later. But that's what this is. Capacity is to equip as many mods as you can. Sometimes you won't be able to equip every single mod in the game, so you'll have to do a specific action, which I'll again speak on later. Well, pretty much after I speak on the Warframe itself. So anyway, capacity just tells you how many mods you can equip on your Warframe, or how many skill points would cost to equip onto your Warframe itself. The first stat in the game is armor. Armor is basically the game's equivalent of defense. Whenever you take damage in the game, it will affect your shields first, and when your shields are down, it will start to affect your health. Armor affects how much health you lose in the game. Because of this, you want to have a high armor rating and be able to tank as many hits as you can. The higher your armor, the less damage you take, or the less HP damage you take. And obviously right there it says shields are not affected by armor, meaning that armor does not affect shields at all, it only affects your health. Energy. Energy is your pool, or your MP in this game, to cast specific abilities. Naturally, your abilities each cost a set amount of energy in order to use. And every time you use energy, or every time you use one of your abilities, your energy will decrease by that amount. So for example, since I have 150 energy, I have 150 energy I can use at any given time. So if I use an ability that costs 25, I will have 125 energy left. And because of that, I will continue to use my energy to do various other actions in the game. To recover energy, you have to pick up these blue energy orbs that are out in that the enemies drop within the actual mission itself. You'll notice the blue orbs as they're actually a telltale. Some orbs will refill 25 energy. Some will refill 50. Some may refill 100. Others may refill all of it. But that's energy in a nutshell. Health. This is basically your HP, your hit points. Basically, like I said, it's total amount of damage a Warframe could take before going into bleed out. If you're playing by yourself and your health reaches 0, you immediately just die. However, if you're in a squad and you lose all of your health, you will be in bleed out. So when you're in bleed out, basically you're down but not out completely, which means that your allies can revive you. Because of this, you can still use your secondary weapon to still fight back and to defend your allies while they, bring you back from bleed out. But in some cases, if you enter bleed out too many times, your bleed out timer will just immediately go straight towards just dead. It happens sometimes, but not all the time. So the general rule of thumb is to not go down often, and try not to lose as much health. To recover health, you'll see these red orbs that are on the ground, similar to energy orbs. Those heal 25 health, 50 health, and so on and so forth. Pretty much the same thing. Shields. This needs no introduction. Just about every video game out there has a sort of shield, so to speak. Most notably in Halo, when Master Chief takes damage, his shield gets affected. Well, at least in the first Halo game. And whenever his shield gets damaged, his shield goes down. But when his shield goes down to nothing, then his health is affected. In this game, it's basically the same thing. The only difference in this is that When you take a specific damage type, it can bypass your shields. For example, Toxin. Well, shields absorb damage except Toxin, because Toxin goes through shields and attacks your health directly. Depleted shields grant a moment of invulnerability. In other words, you'll be vulnerable to follow-up damage. Your health will continue to get damage. Damage interrupts recharge. Basically, if your shield slowly recharges itself, if you take damage, the shield will stop the recharge and will continue to take damage, and your health will be affected again when you lose your shields. So again, basic rule of thumb, stay on the move, make sure your shields are at its highest, and try not to take too much damage because, again, you'll continue to take health damage. Sprint speed. This tells you exactly how fast a Warframe can go. Naturally, Warframes generally have a speed of, I think, 1 or maybe a little bit above that, but some Warframes have a below average speed, meaning they move slower through the levels, which you will want to do parkour moves to keep your speed at its maximum. But it also determines how fast your parkour is. So if your speed is low, your parkour won't be as fast as some frames. So try to keep your Warframe speed at its highest. Although some Warframes do benefit from speed, such as Gauss, but some Warframes don't really benefit from it at all. This is more or less a personal preference when it comes to sprint speed. Maybe you don't like slow Warframes, but sometimes having a slow Warframe can help, and sometimes having an actual Warframe that's fast can also help as well. But again, it's dependent on what you have. Now we're going to come down to the actual things that affect your Warframe in its entirety instead of just being physically seen. Now these next 4 is pretty much determined based on what type of abilities your Warframe has and what each Warframe is capable of doing. So duration modifies the duration of Warframe abilities and the energy cost of toggled abilities. Hover over each ability to see how its stats are affected. What duration does is it affects how long your abilities last when you cast certain abilities. Some Warframe abilities just cost an initial amount of energy and the ability will last for that much time. Meaning if you see a number alongside the ability itself, that means that the Warframe ability is on a number basis. Meaning that duration is only going to affect how long that ability lasts for as long as the ability is active. If the ability is on a per energy basis, you have an initial energy cost, and however much cost of energy it does after the initial cast. One notable Warframe that does this is Valkyrie. When she uses Hysteria, her ability cost is the initial cost of it. Actually, I'm just going to show you, since it's pretty much simple to figure out. This is what Hysteria is. Naturally, it costs 25 to cast and use, but it costs 2.5 energy at first, and then it climbs up to 15 energy per second, meaning that it costs 25 energy to cast, but it's going to cost more energy in order to maintain the ability. When you run out of energy, the ability itself is automatically canceled, and you'll deactivate the ability automatically. Because of this, your ability will just deactivate by itself, and you'll have to grab more energy in order to use it. That's what duration means on abilities that are on a per energy basis. Next up is ability efficiency. Modifies the energy cost of Warframe abilities. The minimum energy cost is 1/4 of the base value. Efficiency is exactly what it sounds like. It determines how much abilities cost. Because it determines how much abilities cost, you can increase the percentage to a specific amount, and it will cost pretty much a fraction of its value. Meaning, you can pretty much have an ability, for example, if you have 25 energy, you can cut the energy cost in half if need be, which means if you have an energy ability, an ability that costs 25 energy, it will cut down to 12.5 energy, basically. Or maybe something a little bit lower, 11.5 or 11.7. DE is kind of weird with, numbers in this game. But basically, efficiency is the more efficiency you have, the cheaper your abilities cost. The least amount of efficiency you have, the more your abilities cost. So certain warframes may have abilities that work best with more energy, while other warframes work best with less energy, but can be more efficient. So in other words, if you're worried that your abilities are expensive, just use mods that increase efficiency and it will cost cheaper, and you can take off certain mods that you don't need on it. Next up is ability range. Modifies the range of warframe abilities. Hover over each ability to see how its stats are affected. Now, range is dependent on how far a warframe's ability can reach. Because a warframe's ability can reach over a specific amount, it determines how far and how many meters each warframe ability reaches. For example, Ripline on Valkyr has a range of 75 meters, meaning I can grab enemies that are 75 meters out. If I put mods on this, I can increase the range from 75 to something much greater. I can increase it up to 100 if I want, or I can increase it up to 150 meters if need be. So abilities like, since this is a single target ability, it's only going to affect that enemy, meaning I can grab enemies that are almost a room away and I can rip them to me if need be. But some abilities like Warcry is range based, meaning that the radius is also affected by range, meaning that the larger my radius, the more allies I can affect. Meaning I can affect allies up to 25 meters away. Right now it doesn't look that far. It's basically almost up to about 30 meters, which is basically the natural range of some abilities. But sometimes if you increase ability range, it may increase the radius so that you don't have to be as close to your allies or enemies as possible in order to affect the range. Same thing with paralysis for her as well. It would affect the range of paralysis, meaning it will affect enemies at 10 meters out, which doesn't seem like it's very far, but if you increase it, you can increase it up to 20 or 30, something like that, which is pretty much almost an entire hallway, so to speak. Next up is ability strength. Modifies the strength of warframe abilities. Hover over each ability to see how its stats are affected. This is the de facto ability power that warframes have that increase how much damage they do with abilities. But just because it affects certain abilities doesn't mean it doesn't affect abilities in what you may think. Ability strength determines how powerful some abilities are, but it can also increase certain buffs or stats of certain things. For example, we're going to go back to this. If I increase the ability strength, not only will I increase certain aspects of the ability, I will also increase how much armor, speed, and how much the enemies are decreased in speed. Meaning, I can increase your damage resistance by 50%. I can increase it by 100%. Meaning, I can double your armor, so to speak, or I can increase it by another 50%. Meaning, if you have, for simplicity's sake, if you have 100 armor, I can increase it up to 200 armor just by casting this ability alone. But other abilities that it may affect are healing abilities, which can increase how much health you recover. So ability strength is dependent on which abilities you have. But in most cases, ability strength will affect also how much damage you deal, meaning if I use ability strength, the damage I have on Ripline will cause 600 slash damage. But it can also increase up to a lot more than that, which means I can almost double the damage it does, meaning I can double it up to 1200 if I want to, or higher. And the rank bonuses right here are pretty much just the bonuses that you get as you rank up your warframe. 50% max energy, energy max, meaning I have, my base energy would be at a certain amount. This increases it by 50%, or if I have, health, it increases my health by 200%, meaning I have I pretty much have 100. Well, yeah, I have about 1.5. Increase in health overall. Same thing with shield as well. I mean, offhand, it doesn't look like shield really affects Valkyr as much, but the best Warframe to check for stuff like this is Excalibur. Yeah, Excalibur would be the best for it because he's the most, well, he's more or less basic frame that you can see most stats for, so to speak. So yeah, that's pretty much all the stats for the Warframe in its entirety. But if you want to really get to know certain abilities, you could go to actual, abilities themselves, and it will give you pretty much everything about the Warframe itself. The one thing about Warframes that you need to pay great attention to is their passive ability. Recover 50% faster from being knocked down. So what you want to do is you want to increase how much you want to pay close attention to the Warframe's passive, because that's what's going to affect your entire build around certain frames. So because he recovers 50% faster from being knocked down, meaning you don't have to worry too much about having mods or certain passives on her that will stop her from being knocked down, because when she gets knocked down, she'll immediately jump back up and jump straight back into the fight. You can also see the different abilities here as well, and not just have to worry about abilities from the actual Warframe menu. You can actually see more in detail for certain things of her abilities. So if you're not familiar with certain abilities or certain things, it's best to come here to see what each ability does and to refresh yourself if you forget. Also, you have a tooltip right here on the side that you can check on that will give you, tips on how to use certain abilities. Like, for example, cast Ripline in quick succession to increase its damage and greatly reduce its energy cost after each successful cast. So if you cast Ripline, you reduce its cost over time. But in order to reduce its cost, you have a combo window in order to cast the ability again. This kind of makes her like Spider-Man. You can cast the ability on any surface. You can cast it off of any surface, no matter what. You can cancel it in the middle of your rip line, and you can let me switch this back. You can cast this in the middle of your rip line, and you can cast it again if you're aiming at the ground. So for example, if I was to cast this, actually as a matter of fact, I'll just show you in its entirety. I'm going to head to the simulacrum and show you exactly what it means. I'm not going to go to a busy relay because I want to make sure that the abilities are exactly what they are, and you can see what I mean. And in case you're wondering, I'm at one of the relays, but I'm going to fast travel to Cephalon Samaris, go to the simulacrum, and show you exactly how these abilities are. Because of this, there are several things you can do, and there are several things you can't. So yeah, obviously this is where you can go if you're unfamiliar. I think you have to go to Cephalon Samaris, and you have to unlock the simulacrum so you can do certain things. So what I mean by cast the ability is like this. I can cast it like that, jump like that, do it again. That little multiplier bar at the bottom, that tells me exactly the multiplier I can do. Well, I have that can enable me to is how much damage I can do in its entirety. Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can spawn in enemies. So yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna unlock one of them. Did I unlock one of them? I don't think I did. Yeah, pause AI. Oh, I did. Oh yeah, I gotta clear these guys out. No, I don't want them. But yeah. Yeah, pretty much this enemy right here. They're at 175, just so to make it easier. Basically, if I do this, it would increase that, basically. Where the heck did they go? Did I? Yeah, I've ripped them all the way off the map. Let me bring them back. But yeah. That pretty much, yeah, you pretty much seen that I done 900, yeah, I done 22 damage. But I'm going to bring them back again, just so you know. If I did it once, 461. Basically, my damage doubled for me doing it. We're going to do it again, but this time I'm going to do it after 4 casts. 1843. Pretty much every time it doesn't matter what I do it for, but it's just going to, but as long as I do it at least 3 times, I'll deal max damage every single time. All right, let me just kill all these enemies. But that's basically what I mean when her abilities are exactly what they are. All right, now that I'm here. So yeah, this is why you want to check the tooltips, especially if you do this in quick succession. If you increase the combo multiplier, you can increase how much time you have between stuff like this. So if you're unfamiliar how each Warframe acts, be sure to check these things out. For example, cast Rip Line on enemies below to send enemies flying upward. Basically, so to speak. But anyway, let's switch back over to Voruna. Well, yeah, let's switch back over to Voruna. Where is she? Right here. Okay. So, that's pretty much it for the Warframe itself. I mean, figuring out Warframes and stuff isn't really that difficult because all these stats all pretty much just start at 100%. Every Warframe starts at that. And you modify it with different weapons. Well, you modify it with different mods, which I was going to get to. Which I'll get to after the weapon itself, because I have different mods on different weapons, and I have a sort of, different thing that goes on between the weapons and stuff. Actually, I want to switch to an actual weapon that's actually pretty good. You know what? I'm going to switch to the Ambassador, just to keep things, simple. In your entire loadout, you have 3 different weapon slots. You have a primary weapon, secondary weapon, and a melee weapon. But for some Warframes, you'll have a special slot, which is called an exalted slot, which is unique for certain frames. One of the frames that is exclusive for is Excalibur. This is pretty much the exalted slot of the frame. You can't change the weapon or anything of it, but the weapon itself is still treated as a weapon, like a melee weapon or a secondary weapon or anything like that. As you upgrade the weapon, you can also mod it as well. So the weapon itself will be treated pretty much as a melee weapon. But some weapons like a secondary weapon or a melee weapon will deactivate in favor of this in its entirety. As a matter of fact, I'll show you this as well. Now, you see that I'm using the actual melee weapon itself. I'm gonna cast Exalted Blade, which is his ultimate. So if I cast this weapon I won't be able to use at all, but I can still use my actual weapons themselves, like this, and my secondary weapon. I can still use my primary weapon and my secondary weapon, but when I switch to my actual weapon itself, it's going to switch to my actual exalted weapon. Which means that I won't be able to use that melee weapon that I brought with me. Once I deactivate it, I'll switch immediately back to my melee weapon. But certain Warframes can use exalted weapons, but not all of them. And like I said before, exalted weapons are unique to certain Warframes. So you won't see Exalted Blade on any other Warframe except Excalibur. Excalibur Umbra is unique because Excalibur Umbra is part of the Excalibur, line of frames. Well, there's actually 3 different variants of Excalibur. There's the standard variant, which I'm playing as right now. There's the Prime variant, which is exclusive to players on PC that actually backed the game and which are considered founders, and there's no way to get Excalibur Prime, so don't bother unless you're a founder of the game. And Excalibur Umbra, which you'll get from completing the Sacrifice quest line. But anyway, back to the actual melee weapons themselves. Back to the actual weapons themselves, and I am going to switch back to Varuna. And as I explained before, there's a primary weapon, secondary weapon, and a melee weapon. Any Warframe can equip any weapon. However, certain weapons will activate certain stats on certain weapons if you use with a certain frame. I'm not going to go into that because that's completely different territory, but with each weapon, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Every weapon in the game has pretty much the same stats as they normally have in any particular way. And because each weapon has different stats, each weapon is different based on different characteristics. You have different weapon types like sniper rifles, assault rifles, shotguns, stuff like that. Grenade launchers, rocket launchers, bows. Various different weapons have various different stats. And the weapon that I'm using is pretty much an assault weapon. Well, an assault rifle, so to speak. And every weapon has different stats. And each stat represents different things in the actual weapon itself. And because of this, certain weapons... Well, actually, every weapon in the game is the exact same for every player in the game. There is no weapon that is different from any player, like how in certain games you have different stats for different weapons. Like if you pick up a weapon, it'll have, stats in this category. And if you pick up the same weapon, it'll have, different stats, like it'll be more accurate, or it'll have more damage, or it'll have a different perk, etc. In this game, it's different. In this game, every single weapon is created the exact same. How we mod the weapon will change its characteristics and how it will operate. So anyway, the different stats are accuracy. How far projectiles will deviate from the reticle. Higher values are more accurate. Accuracy is improved while aiming. Everybody knows what this is. Accuracy is your all-encompassing, it's pretty much your all-encompassing tool. Basically, that reticle that's in the center, this determines how accurate my shots are. The higher my accuracy is, the easier it is for me to hit certain, targets. And the lower it is, actually, the least accurate it is. That's basically all it is. The higher and I see the accuracy is 111.1, which is absolutely crazy because meaning that it doesn't deviate at all from the reticle. Ammo maximum. How much ammo can be held beyond the capacity of your magazine? Basically, the ammo maximum is how much ammo you have in reserve. That's basically all it means. Certain weapons have a certain amount of maximum ammo in their inventory. What this does is it determines how much ammo you can carry outside of what you normally can pick up. Ammo pickup. How much ammo is obtained from pickups. This determines how much ammo you get per drop from each individual, from each drop. Basically, stuff like this. I mean, this isn't exactly what it is, but the pickup is exactly what it sounds like. Every time you pick up ammo, you'll pick up 80 ammo every single time. That's basically what it is. Fire rate. Maximum number of projectiles that can be launched per second. Basically your actual fire rate. This determines how many rounds you shoot per second and how long it takes for you to empty the clip. So basically, I fire 13.33 ammo per second, meaning I'm immediately shooting 13 rounds, almost 14 rounds per second. But, of course, fire rate. I'm not going to go into detail with that. Magazine. Number of ammo rounds a weapon holds. Basically, this is the amount of ammunition you hold per clip. Whenever you reload, this is how much ammunition is inside the gun. And as I explained before, you can adjust how much ammo is in your magazine and everything with mods. You can increase the ammo count. You can increase the ammo maximum count as well with mods. Again, I'm not going to go into detail with that. Noise. Unalerted enemies will react to weapons being fired if they are alarming, but not if they are silent. This determines how quiet a weapon is. A weapon that's alarming will immediately alarming. The amount of noise a weapon creates under alarming is enemies will immediately be alerted to what you're doing. That's basically all it is. Enemies will already know where you are and will be alerted and will fire upon you immediately. Other weapons such as bows are silent, meaning enemies won't be able to detect a killed foe if they happen to get eliminated in a silent manner. Basically, if the weapon is silent, if you kill an enemy from behind, it's considered a stealth kill, so to speak. If it's silent and you use a bow and you kill enemies behind the enemy in front won't be alerted to it at all. It'll be as though they're still silent. Only when the enemy detects the actual body will the enemy be alerted, and then they will hunt you down. Reload. Time in seconds to refill the magazine from empty. We all know this. Reload speed determines how long it takes to reload the entire weapon. And in this game, seconds do matter. So there are mods that you can decrease the reload speed of certain weapons. So with the reload speed of this, it'll have to take you 2, almost 3 seconds to reload the entire clip. Some weapons will reload some weapons such as certain shotguns will reload per shell, meaning it will reload on a per shell basis, meaning that's how many shells you'll reload when you fire, so to speak. Actually, as a matter of fact, there is a weapon that does that. Where is it? Nope, it's not the Boltor. What the heck was it? Let's see, where the heck is it? I did have it. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what it is. Let me scroll down to it. I don't want to go too fast because I don't want to just... Where the heck is it? I think this is it right here. Destroy. That's basically what it is. So yeah. So yeah, it takes 5 seconds to reload this from empty, but it reloads pretty much per shell. So basically, I reload 2 shells per second. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's basically how long it takes from empty. I know certain weapons won't do so from a certain thing as well, so it's best to really pay attention to the reload speed for certain weapons, because you don't want to just have a weapon and then just have it, run out of ammo in the middle of, fighting enemies, and your weapon ain't doing anything at all. But anyway, Riven Disposition. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, but Riven Disposition modifies the performance of an equipped Riven mod. More filled dots indicate stronger stats. Basically, if you have a Riven mod, which is basically, well, not this. If you have a Riven mod, which is this, a Riven mod is probably the only mod in the entire game that you can pretty much re-roll to get various stats on the weapon itself. And obviously, the more filled dots, the bigger the bonus you'll get from this. But again, I'm not going to go into detail with this, as it's, much more complicated than it sounds. Trigger. How the weapon operates when the trigger is pressured. Auto trigger weapons fire repeatedly until the trigger is released or the magazine is empty. We all know this. This is a fully automatic weapon. The weapon will continue to fire until I let go of the trigger. Some weapons are unique in that the weapon itself will fire, like for example, that's the automatic. It fires until I release the trigger. Charge trigger weapons must have a trigger held down to fire at full effectiveness. In short, all bows share this, But you don't have to. But for certain bows, you don't have to fire at its full. However, you'll deal more damage if you fire it in its entirety like that. You'll deal more damage that way. That's just for this weapon itself. Another weapon. Well, another weapon itself. Oh yeah, I know which one. Another weapon itself won't fire until you fully charge it. Now, where the heck is it? Here it is. The Daikyu. Like, if I try to fire this, it's not going to work at all. So, because of this, it won't fire at all. However, if I charge it, then it'll fire. However, some weapons do have the charge, some weapons don't. But some weapons have a unique feature where if you fire it like this, if you fire it, you'll fire it in, well, bursts. Trigger weapons fire a short sequence of shots per press of the trigger. Now, this is burst. It fires 2 shots. And I believe this one is yeah, this one's also auto, but this one you have to hold down. It's kind of like a chain gun, so to speak. There is another weapon that I want to show you. Where is it? Yeah, here it is, the Tigress. Actually, let me show you what it. Let me show you it. Duplex. A lot of people don't know what duplex is, but duplex fires the weapon in a specific way. For example, if I fire this if I fire this holding it down, I will fire the shot. However, if I let go, it will fire again. So as a matter of fact, I'm just going to show you. Like this, basically. So if I aim down like this, and I do this, I hold this down, I let go, it'll fire again. So basically, I can fire in quick succession, pretty much. Like that. I just do this. Fires just like that. That's what duplex is. I know a lot of people may be confused about how it is, but that's exactly what it's like. However, some weapons are beam weapons in which you have to hold down a specific, you have to hold it down for a specific amount of time. Well, let me see. I have the flux rifle. Where is it? There it is. Held. Held trigger weapons create a continuous beam that have a short warm-up time to reach full damage. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to bring them back out again. This is basically what it is. That's exactly what it is, just like that. Yeah, weapons like this generally don't have as much power at first, but once you hold it down and it kicks up damage, the damage will start to ramp up. Alright, time to go back to the ambassador. But that's basically what it is. I will go into detail about some of the other stuff, but this is just the type that I'm actually just going to focus on. I'm not going to focus on charge or anything like that or any of that other stuff because I don't want you to get too confused about certain things in the game, and I don't want you to just get turned off from it. Next up is the actual damage. The damage is where is pretty much the lion's share of what the weapon does. Because of this, your weapon is going to deal damage, and you're going to want to deal high amounts of damage. First up is critical chance. Chance that any given attack will do bonus critical hit damage. Values over 100% have a chance to become orange critical hits, and over 200% have a chance to become red. Basically what this is that the higher your critical hit chance is, the more often you will see those yellow, orange, and red numbers respectively. So with the weapon itself, so with critical chance at 14%, there's a 14% chance every shot I fire is going to be a critical hit. Which means there's going to be I think a 1 in, I have to say, out of the entire out of the entire weapon itself, 14% of the time, I will deal critical damage, which may not seem a whole lot, but once you have mods that increase critical chance, you'll increase the chance that you will see those numbers, and you'll be able to deal as much damage as you possibly can. Some weapons deal decent damage with critical chance, but some weapons don't deal a whole lot of damage with critical chance, which means you need to focus more on another thing as well. Critical multiplier. Critical hit damage is multiplied by this value. The added damage is double for orange critical hits, and triple for red. Basically, this tells you how much damage those critical hits deal. So for example, if your weapon deals 100 damage and your critical chance kicks in, the critical chance will increase that critical hit damage by however much this is. So say for example your critical multiplier is 1 and you deal, well actually your critical multiplier is 2 and you deal 100 damage to the enemy. When the critical hit damage kicks in, you'll deal 200 damage, which means you'll deal double the damage that you normally would. If you increase it higher and higher and higher, up to, for example, six times damage, every time you hit a critical hit, you'll deal 600%. You'll deal 600 damage per shot per critical. Basically, what that means is critical multiplier and critical chance go hand in hand with one another. You want to increase this if you want to get the big numbers from this. This is key to all those millions of damage that those players be doing. So if you want to get those numbers up, start with critical chance and critical multiplier as a start. Status. The chance that a hit will apply a status effect based on the types of damage the weapon inflicts. Basically, the status damage determines what type of status damage the weapon itself will deal. Because my weapon only deals electricity, this determines how often I will deal electricity damage to enemies. Because I deal only this standalone type of damage, I don't got to worry about any other damage types in the game being dealt. Meaning, electricity is just going to deal just straight up electricity damage to any enemy out there. And just like critical chance, the higher the stat is, the more often I will hit an enemy with status damage. Believe it or not, this also goes hand in hand with critical multiplier and critical chance. It's separate from critical chance and critical multiplier, but if you apply certain status effects, you'll decrease the enemy's resistance to certain status effects and you'll deal even greater damage. Again, status effect deals damage based on which damage type your weapon has. And because of that, I'm going to get into the actual damage types in the actual weapons themselves. As a matter of fact, I'm going to head back to the orbiter. And I'm actually going to show you I'm going to show you, let me see, what should I show you next? Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you about the different damage types in the game. Damage. Oh, and in case you didn't know, if you want to know more, just go into the codex. It'll tell you about the different types of damage in the game. Anyway, we all know, this is pretty much just the natural stuff that the game tells you about. Pretty much everything that I told you about before is going to tell you about here. But in this one, I'm going to show you about the different types of damage that's in the game. Basically, there's actually 3 different types of damage in the game. Well, actually 2 different types. There's physical damage, which this is. Then there's elemental damage. However, if you subdivide elemental damage, there's primary elemental types and secondary elemental types. But in this game, in this, I want to tell you about the actual physical damage types. Physical damage is made up of 3 parts. Impact, which looks like a hammer icon. Puncture, which looks like a dart going through a space. And slash, which is actually slash. Yeah, weapons tend to be a blend of these types. They can be modded to specialize further. Use these wisely against shielded and armored enemies. Weapons that can perform critical strikes for increased damage. Yeah, weapons can be performed critical strikes for increased damage. Look for mods that enhance these effects. Each damage type has a chance to put a lasting effect on your enemies, making them vulnerable. If this happens, you will see a damage type symbol on your HUD like this. Basically, the 3 different damage types deal with the 3 different bars in the game. For the yellow health bars, you want to use puncture damage because puncture affects armor. But I should explain how puncture affects armor. Puncture is a status effect that deals weaken. Weaken is basically a damage type that when enemies are affected by it, not only will it deal additional damage against armored enemies or yellow health bar enemies, it will decrease their damage as well. Meaning the more puncture damage you layer onto enemies, the less damage they will deal to you over time. So puncture damage isn't as useless on corpus enemies who uses 2 types of health bars, but if you deal puncture damage, they'll deal less damage to you. So remember, puncture damage affects armor. Armor enemies will take additional damage, and it also deals a proc weaken, which makes enemies deal less damage to you. Impact. Impact deals additional damage to shielded enemies and impairs their shield regeneration. And not just that, impact damage will cause stagger, which causes enemies to stumble. Its 3rd perk is that it will increase this mercy kill threshold, so to speak. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you about that. I'm going to go back to the simulacrum. The only reason I left the simulacrum is so you can actually see how the damage type, how certain different status on the weapon itself will deal. But I'm going to show you exactly what happens when I deal puncture damage to an enemy. So let's fast travel to Cephalon Samaris. Let's go to the simulacrum. Alright, now let's get an impact weapon. And I know just the perfect one. Let me see, where the heck is it? Here it is, the Fragor. I'm going to make sure that I'm just going to make sure. But yeah, if you're unsure about certain weapon stats, just hover over them and it'll show you about the different damage types. But because I'm choosing the Fragor, I'm going to show you exactly how the weapon itself affects. Most effective against shields. Impact status increases the chance that the target will be vulnerable to the finisher at low health. So we're going to go back and we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. I'm going to bring them back out. I know this only affects certain enemy effects, shields, but I'm going to show you exactly how this affects them. Like, for example, like this. I'm hitting them with damage with it, and I'm causing them to stagger. But, you'll notice that right now the health bar there's really nothing happening to them. But that's because certain enemies can only be mercy killed. I'm going to kill them, but this time I'm going to clear that out. And I'm going to bring a, let me see, an Arid Trooper. Yeah. I want to bring them out, an Arid Trooper. Basically, any heavy enemies that are around it'll take time for them to be damaged. But in this one, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. I'm hitting them. But you'll see the status effect that's right above them. But you'll notice that, well, actually, the one thing I want to do is I want to spawn an enemy that actually, hold on. There's an enemy I want to spawn that will, oh yeah, an ancient healer. I'm going to spawn this one. Oops. I want to spawn them. But this time, to make sure things go swimmingly, I'm not gonna have a companion this time. Let's see. Normally, when you attack an enemy, so to speak. Actually, why did I do that? I thought I killed them all. Alright. Hopefully this time it'll work. Alright. I just want to do this because some enemies can be mercy killed, some enemies can't be. But this is what I mean. For this, you see just above the health bar, you see that yellow bracket that's pretty much just over the health bar? Basically, that's a mercy kill threshold. Basically, if the health bar goes anywhere past that, I can kill the enemy instantly. Impact damage increases it, which I'm going to do. It doesn't look like it's affecting it much, but every time I deal impact damage, you'll see that the bar itself, the bar itself moved upward. Because it moved upward, that means if I dealt more damage and it went past that, I'll be able to mercy kill them. I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this. Every time I deal damage to them, and I deal impact damage, it's going to keep the mercy kill threshold that much higher. Now, when I reach the point where its health goes down, that's going to happen. You'll see a little symbol just above them. Because of that, I could do this and do that. Basically, it's an instant kill when I do that. Because of that, you want to make sure that when you use impact damage, you can only use them for certain heavy enemies. Like enemies like that, you can use them for, but regular enemies like these guys are not gonna do anything at all. It's not gonna work. Alright, we're gonna go back to this. Alright. And as I said before, puncture damage reduces the target's damage output up to 75%. Basically, if I use puncture damage, and I'm going to equip a weapon that does deal puncture damage. I'm not going to use that because that's a nope, not Broken Scepter. Yeah, the Destreza. I'm going to use this. And I'm going to show you exactly why this weapon deals increased damage to enemy armor, and why you want to use it on there. Why you want to use it on the enemy. We're going to spawn them again. Actually, clear that out. Mind you, this weapon deals puncture damage. Against them, it does a lot of damage. But you'll notice that there's no mercy bar that's above it. Above the actual enemy itself. That means that enemies like these are pretty much the grunts. You can't deal as much damage to them as you want. But you notice, my weapon is unmodded and I'm dealing damage to an Arid Butcher, which is 175 damage. I mean 170, which is level 175. This is an unmodded weapon that deals puncture damage. That is what happens when you deal puncture damage to an enemy, or when you deal the right type of damage to an enemy that's weak against that type of damage. Which means you want to make sure that you actually have the right type of damage that's being dealt to the enemy. But for this sake, I'm going to kill that many enemies. I'm going to go back and I am going to, not the ambulance. Let me see. There should be a corpus enemy I have. Yeah. Not them. Where is it? That's Xmas. You know what? Yeah, I'll just do crewman. You'll notice that I actually took them down much faster with that. But you'll see that puncture damage basically does nothing to this. I'm dealing damage to the enemy itself, But again, that's only damage to their shields. Because I'm dealing damage to their shields, it's barely affecting them at all. But I immediately started chipping away at the enemies. I started chipping away at the Grineer themselves. But you see, I'm barely dealing damage. The other enemy I fought against, I was dealing hundreds of damage. For this guy, I'm only dealing 81 and 49 and stuff like that. But you notice that my critical chance is going off. That's because the weapon itself has increased critical chance. But yeah, that's basically what puncture damage does. What may work for some enemies may not work for others. But the critical chance on this is naturally high for this weapon, which is 28, which is extremely good. And because this deals primarily puncture damage, I can still deal damage to Corpus enemies, but I won't be able to deal as much. So if I do bring a puncture weapon with me to a mission, I would do it just to eliminate all the actual damage that they would deal to me. Now, Slash is completely different. Most effective against flesh. Slash status ignores the target's armor and causes them to bleed for extra damage over a short duration. Basically, what slash damage does is it deals true damage, which everybody says. Now, true damage ignores armor and everything else, and it'll take tick damage over time. So let me see. I do have a slash weapon. I think this is puncture, I believe. Yeah, that's puncture. I do have a slash weapon. The hate, I believe, is slash. Nah, it's puncture. But for this, you want to deal pretty good. Actually, I think this is slash. Nope, not that either. Oh, that's something else entirely. But yeah, this is slash. I know it is. Yeah, the Tatsu. Since the Tatsu is primarily slash, it deals increased damage to, it'll deal increased damage to enemies. I did proc slash on the enemies at first, but I'm going to show you exactly what happens when I actually proc it, and I'm going to do it against the, I'm going to do it against the Ancient Disruptor. So, because I'm doing this against the Disruptor, you're going to see exactly how it works. That's the slash proc. It ignores pretty much the entirety of everybody's health, everybody's armor. Which means that if the enemy is difficult to take down, the slash proc will deal direct damage to the enemy. But for Corpus enemies, it will deal direct damage to their shields. It won't deal damage to their health at all. But it will chip down their shields. But it'll only chip down their shields for as long as their proc is active. So you don't want to start dealing damage to an enemy's health. An enemy's shields, because it will block all damage. But in its entirety, slash is pretty good against most enemies, even against Grineer, because it ignores some of their armor since they're armored enemies. So you want to combine that with, other stuff as well. So that's it for the physical damage types. But next I want to talk to you about the elemental types. Now, there are 4 different elemental types in the game, and each element is heralded by a different symbol. And I'm going to show you exactly what that is. And we're going to go back to the ambassador. The 4 damage types in the game, the 4 elemental damage types in the game. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go back to the orbiter for this, because that's just what the physical damage types does. Now, the actual elemental damage types are different. We're going to go back to training and go back to damage. We know about that. We know about the physical damage types. And now the elements. elemental damage can be applied in addition to physical damage. There are 4 primary elemental damage types. Heat damage, which will burn and scorch foes. Heat damage is pretty good because it not only scorch or burn them, it also causes the status effect immolation, which causes enemies to panic, but it also reduces a portion of their armor per tick. Meaning, whenever you apply heat damage, their armor takes a hit as well, which basically softens them up, so to speak. So because of this, when you soften up damage for them, it makes it easier to take them down, and you're dealing tick damage to them over time. And because of that, when you apply heat damage, you want to make sure that you apply it to enemies, and make sure that they're under the effects for as long as they possibly can. And when the heat damage ends, they'll recover some armor over time. So when they do recover armor, the armor will slowly tick back up to where it's back to full power. Electricity. Damage is capable of stunning and damaging enemies. Electricity is also decent because with electricity it will proc Tesla coil. It will shock and stun enemies for a brief period of time, but with Tesla coil, they'll be under the effects of electricity, which will cause them to damage enemies that are around them. Basically, they'll become a conduit of damage, which is good for enemies that are in range of one another. It's also capable of dealing a little bit more damage against shielded enemies, and it's just pretty good, especially in a group of enemies. Cold. Damage can slow down enemies and deal damage. Cold damage procs the freeze effect, which causes enemies to slow down and slow down their rate of fire. Basically, everything they do will be pretty much half of the speed that they normally would be. And in some cases, such as Frost, he can just outright freeze them in their entirety, which causes them to, remain solid and will cause them to not deal damage at all. The decent thing about cold damage is that if you combine cold damage with puncture, you can not only decrease the amount of damage that the enemies will deal, you'll also decrease their rate of fire and decrease their damage further. Which means they'll react slower, they'll deal much damage slower, and they'll pretty much move much slower. Toxin. Toxin damage is effective against damaging an enemy's health. The thing about toxin damage is that they don't really tell you exactly how it affects enemy's health, but the way it affects the enemy is that toxin damage technically bypasses enemy shields. So if you go against a corpus enemy, or if you go against enemy corpus enemies that have enhanced shields, toxin damage just bypasses that and will deal tick damage over time. It is somewhat effective against armored enemies. It is somewhat effective against Grineer enemies and the infested, but it's not as effective as you may think it is. Because of this, you want to make sure that you deal toxin damage primarily against corpus enemies because some corpus enemies don't have large health bars. So if you're fighting against enemies that have enhanced shields, toxin is your best friend. Just to let you know, this stuff does affect you to a fundamental scale as well. Basically, every enemy has their own strengths and weaknesses. You've seen that when I highlighted certain enemies, you'll see that they have different damage bonuses. You'll deal bonus damage to certain enemies, and they'll have different resistances. So for this, know your enemy. Enemies you face may have different resistances and weaknesses to various elements. Use the Codex scanner to learn more about their weaknesses to specific damage types. So what this means is, actually I'm going to go back. Universe. Factions. Because of this, certain enemy types are weak against certain types of damage. For example, if I'm fighting against, a Corpus crewman, they're naturally weak to, impact damage and cold damage. Well, their shields are, but I'll deal increased damage if I use magnetic. But trust me, I'll show you what magnetic is, and I'll show you what those damage types are, and I'll show you exactly what they affect. But for their flesh, their actual health is only 60, which means you could just blow them. A stiff gust of wind is enough to blow them down. So for their flesh, you could deal increased damage with slash, toxin, and viral damage. Although viral damage isn't Although viral damage is effective, using any other damage type against them won't deal as much damage as you may think. Because of this, you want to make sure that you get into the habit of using Codex scanners as much as you possibly can. Not many enemies you can scan, but most enemies you can, and you can just pretty much just understand exactly how much damage each enemy can deal. So you want to get into the habit of scanning enemies as much as you can. Like this, I don't scan this as much, which is why I don't have all the scans on them. But yeah, that's just the that's just what the primary elemental damage types does. Now the crux of all the damage is that you can combine those elements. You can combine them for various different status effect damages as well. A Tenno Master may go, combine attacks for greater forms. A Tenno Master may go even further, combining the 4 primary elemental damage types to create secondary ones. Now, secondary elemental types are unique because they deal various types of damage in unique ways. Blast is a damage type that combines both heat damage and cold damage. What Blast does is it gives the proc and accuracy. Basically, the enemies will be less accurate when they aim at you. This is pretty good because if there are enemies that are highly accurate or enemies that deal a chunk of damage, you can use Blast and it'll pretty much put them in a real dire state in which they can't aim at you. So if you try to combine Blast damage with puncture damage, they'll not only deal reduced damage, but they'll also be inaccurate the entire time. So you're not going to be dealing as much damage. They're not dealing as much damage, and they're pretty much in a bad way. Radiation. Radiation combines heat damage and electricity. Radiation deals the proc, which is Brainwash. I know it's a technical name for it, but at least I say it deals Brainwash. What Brainwash does is that enemies will deal damage to any surrounding enemies that they are close to. Because of this, the enemy itself will deal increased damage, but they'll take increased damage as well from any source. So basically, you're increasing their damage, you're increasing their damage against enemies, and you're increasing how much damage they take. All enemies under the effects of radiation are basically similar to Nyx and her abilities, where she would use mind control and brainwash enemies to fight for you. Radiation is the same thing, only enemies will fight against you and everybody else around you. Gas. Gas combines heat damage and toxin. Gas damage is unique because it deals damage over time on enemies, but the way it works is that with gas damage, any enemies that's caught within its radius will take damage. And dealing additional procs will expand the gas cloud and will cause more enemies to be affected by it. Each gas cloud has its own proc and range, meaning you can extend the range to as far as you pretty much want. But after the effect ends, the gas cloud will leave, but you can reapply it. But the unique thing about gas is that if you apply it to an enemy, the enemy doesn't have to be alive in order for the ability itself to, be effective at all. Because of this, you don't want the ability to, you can still have, the ability will still be active if somebody's still within its range. So you can apply status effects to that range, but the gas cloud won't expand or anything. So gas is pretty good against pretty much most factions. Magnetic. Magnetic combines cold damage and electricity. Magnetic is unique because it deals increased damage against enemy shields, and it stops shield regeneration for a certain period of time. Because of this, you want to combine impact damage and magnetic, so you increase the damage you deal against shields, and you can increase the mercy kill threshold. Because if you're going against Corpers and you eliminate their shields, if the threshold is high enough, all you gotta do is just take down their shields and immediately just mercy kill them, and that's pretty much it. But for you, it will deal magnetic damage, but you will lose energy over time. You'll lose 50 energy per second, meaning if the status effect lasts 6 seconds and you lose 50 energy per second, you're gonna lose, I believe, 100. Yeah, Yeah, you lose about 240 energy per second. I mean, you lose 240 energy in its entirety, which means your energy stores will be eliminated. Viral. This combines cold damage and toxin. Viral damage deals increased damage against enemy health. The thing about viral damage is that it's most effective against Grineer because they use cloned flesh. And because of this, viral damage will deal to it will deal to proc virus, which will deal increased damage against enemies. So if you combine this with pretty much the next elemental damage type I'm going to tell you about, it's going to increase how much damage they take and pretty much just chop their enemies down in its entirety. So yeah, viral damage is good, especially against health. Corrosive. This combines both electricity and toxin. Corrosive damage is unique because it directly affects and kills an enemy's armor rating in its entirety. Because of this, and again, it's effective against, Grineer enemies, corrosive damage is good because it provides pretty much the largest amount of armor, pretty much an armor attack in its entirety. Basically, if you go against an armored enemy, you're pretty much dealing, if you deal half the damage that you deal with this, you're going to be dealing full bars of damage every single time. So basically, use mods to extend and mutate the damage potential of your most powerful weapons. Now, the thing about certain weapons is that certain weapons have certain damage types, but certain weapons are best at dealing status effect damage and dealing critical chance. So, because of this, you want to unequip every single mod you have on your weapon and take a look at your weapon's stats. Like from this, I can tell you straight up, even though the weapon doesn't deal as high critical chance, I can put critical chance on this, but at the same time, I'll more or less focus on status because status chance is at 26%, and if I increase it, I can increase the chance that I will deal electricity damage in its entirety, which means I'll be dealing electricity damage more and more and more over time. So because of this, I would focus more on status chance, and if I have any mods left over, any capacity left over, I could slap on another mod that could increase. I could probably slap on a mod that would increase critical chance and increase the critical multiplier. So because of this, I want to increase pretty much whatever I can on the weapon that is most effective as. I don't have to worry about magazine size, but if a mod does increase the magazine size of the weapon, especially if it's a mod, I won't have to worry too much about. I'm not worried too much about it. I'm doing it just for the actual status effect itself. As a matter of fact, I can show you that right now. One of these weapons does do that. Yeah, that's thermite rounds, wildfire. For example, if I add wildfire to my weapon, the one thing I'm only focused on is just the heat damage. The plus of it is just that I get a 20% magazine capacity. So if I just put this on here, I know for a fact my magazine capacity is increasing, but I'm also adding, heat damage. So because of this, I know for a fact that I'm not too worried about the magazine size, but I'm focused more on dealing more damage to the enemy itself. And that's because, 60% more heat damage. So I focus more on what the weapon is strongest as. But in its entirety, I will focus more on certain aspects of the weapon. Like if I know this weapon is good at what it does, I will focus one configuration on, dealing just raw elemental damage, electricity damage, and I will have another one focus on another type of effect, and I will have another one focus on a certain, like if I'm doing a certain, I would say a certain mission or fighting against a certain enemy, I would do so from there. So speaking of, the final thing I'm going to speak to you guys about is mods. I know I said this before and I said it a ton of times. Maybe I have throughout the entirety of, me streaming or videos. But mods are basically the lifeblood of the entire game. The reason why is because mods determine a bunch of different things about your weapons and what you have on your Warframe in its entirety. Because of this, certain mods do specific things for Warframes and your weapons, and your companions as well. There are different classes of mods in this game, and I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but it's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to go through and explain the different aspects of a mod itself. So, for example, the mod itself is made up of several different components. Obviously, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see how many of that mod I have. This basically tells me how many of that mod I have in my inventory. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a number and a symbol. Basically, the number determines how many skill points I need in order to equip the mod itself. The symbol next to it is a polarity. There are different polarities in this game, and each one will determine whether or not I would decrease the cost of it on my weapon, or if it does anything else. For example, if I have a mod, for example, the Serration mod, it increases my overall damage output by 165%. If I put this on a weapon in its entirety, it's only going to give me, it's going to cost me 14, skill points. However, if I put this in a slot that's, that doesn't match the mod itself, it's going to increase the mod capacity itself, meaning it's going to increase the mod by a large amount, which will, give me 18 in its entirety. And that's because the mod itself isn't in a matching polarity slot. But if I put it in the actual polarity slot, remember the mod cost is 14. So if I put this in the actual slot, I pretty much cut it in half, meaning it only costs 7 to equip. Because of this, you want to make sure that the mods that you have in the slot are the mods that you actually use for the actual slot itself. You don't want to slot something, like that doesn't match the polarity at all into something else. So because of this, you want to make sure that your mods are in the correct slot. But there are ways you can do certain things to add or take out mod slots and whatnot. Basically, if you use a special puzzle piece item, which is called a forma, you could do so. You can polarize a weapon, and you can reset its level, and you can add a new mod polarity to the weapon. However, this only works if you have a max rank weapon in its entirety. Meaning, if you don't have a max rank weapon, you can't mod it again. You can't polarize any slot on this again until you max rank it. This is pretty much where builds and stuff come into play when it comes to mods and stuff for the weapon itself. But anyway, let me see. Well, you'll see all the way at the top. It's kind of hard to see itself, but all the way at the top, you'll see these three sort of, dots at the top. Those are pretty much the rarity dots that tells you exactly how rare certain mods are. So if certain mods are rare, it will tell you exactly which category it will be in. Such as, well, there are different types of mods. You have you have standard mods, which are the, bronze, silver, and gold mods, and then you have mods that are, then you have, certain specialty mods, such as, Obsidian, Riven, and all those type of mods. But I'm not going to go into detail with any of that. I'm going to detail with that much later. But anyway, back to what I was normally talking about. Obviously, in the center of the mod, you'll see the name of the mod, which is Pressure Point, and under it, you'll see the mod description, which is it'll give 20% melee damage. And in the bar just below that, it'll tell you exactly what type of mod it is. There are different types of mods and types of categories of mods that will tell you what it's under. This one is under melee, but you'll have certain mods that are under primary, secondary, again, melee, bow, unique, universal, etc. These type of mods determine what type of what the mod is linked to and what type of what type of weapon the mod itself works for. Below that, excuse me. Below that, you'll see the rank up dots, pretty much. Well, the rank up levels. Basically, every time you rank a weapon up, one dot will glow. It will tell you exactly which type of mod it is. Basically, if I do this, I'll increase the mod's pretty much effectiveness overall. Basically, I'm leveling up the mod. When I rank up the mod, you'll see that in the upper right hand corner, the mod cost also increases. Whenever you increase a mod, every time you level it up once, it gains one level in what you need to equip it. And it'll keep going up again and again and again until you max rank the mod itself. But at the same time, you'll also increase the actual damage potential it deals. Like if I rank this up to rank 5, the melee damage I will deal with this weapon is 120%. But at the cost, it will cost more, and I will need to, level my weapon up more. But at the same time, you'll also need to get the special resource called Endo. You need Endo and you need credits. Both of these are needed in order to rank up the weapon itself, well, rank up the mod, and you'll need to collect a lot of it. And a bit of an excerpt, well, not an excerpt, but in its entirety, when it comes to mods, different things you can do can change based on what type of mod you want and what type of mod you actually need for certain things. So say for example you have a ton of mods. Like I have 303 redirections. I could do different things. I could select a mod to begin fusion, or I could transmute 4 mods to get a higher ranking mod. I could sell the mods for credits, or I could dissolve them down into Endo, which is good because I need Endo in order to rank up the mods themselves. And because I have so much Endo, this is going to be needed to rank up the weapons. You use less Endo, but you use more credits in order to rank up your mods. So for example, Endo, concentrated energy used to fuse and upgrade mods. Can be found in missions, dissolved from mods, or extracted from Ayatans. And I'll speak about Ayatans in a minute. So say for example you have too many mods. You have a ton of credits but you don't have enough Endo. You can dissolve all 303 of your mods, or whichever mods you have, and you can dissolve it into Endo itself. Or you can dissolve it or you can just sell it off for credits. It's all in what you want and what you need at the time. But because you're going to be collecting mods all the time, there's always going to be a steady source of income depending on what you do. But say for example you want to fuse mods. You can select any range of mods you want. Like for example, I can select 4 of these to transmute. I can transmute 4 of these for 12,000 credits into a new mod itself. The game itself will tell you, do you want to transmute, whichever, like such and such mods into a new mod. If I hit yes, it will transmute it into a new mod itself. So I transmuted this into Continuous Misery, which is for the rifle, which is 25% status duration. So because of that, I was able to get that. Now, because I did that, I can actually do this with, 4 different mods if I feel like it. I get the exact same thing, but this time I'm doing 4 different mods. But when you do stuff like this, the mods will be random. Like for example, I got Sudden Impact from Arc Melee. I'm not going to go into Arc Wing or anything like that because these run under the exact same thing. So if you know about the different weapons and the different stats, this is exactly the same thing. Like since I did all 4 of those, I got Sudden Impact, which is 10% status chance to Arc Melee. Now, say for example, I just want to sell off some mods. Like I just want to sell these. I can just sell however many one I want. I can sell it for 2,000 credits. Immediately sold. But say I want to sell 10 of these, but I want to get Ayatan, while I want to get Endo. I can dissolve 10 of those, and I can just get Endo for it. There, I got 50 Endo, easy. So because of that, you want to make sure you have a habit of coming to your mod station, and put more. And you can sell off a lot of your mods, and you can get more. You can either fuse them to get a new mod, so you don't have to keep running around trying to get random mods or anything like that, or you could just break them down and sell them, or you could just dissolve them and get Endo. But there is one thing I do want to say before I get to Ayatan treasures. If you combine 4 mods of the same type, you have a rare chance to get a higher ranked mod. Meaning, if I do 4 of these again, there's a chance that I could get a silver mod. But if I do 4 silver mods, there's a chance that I will get a gold. If I do 4 gold, I'll just get, you know, another gold. So that's pretty much it for the mods themselves. But the final thing I'm going to talk about, and I actually thought about this, and I didn't want to, you know, just take it. I didn't want to just, you know, just keep blabbering on and on and on, because I know I've been skipping over my words every now and then. But the next thing I'm going to talk about is the Ayatan treasures. Now the thing about Ayatan treasures is that they could be used in one or two different ways. You can use them as a decoration, which is pretty much what I use mine for, which is these guys right here. Or, excuse me, I can actually sell them off to Maru, so I can get, you know, Endo for these. So for example, this Ayatan sculpture, I could get 3,450 Ayatan, well, Endo for this. Because of this, I can sell this to Maru, and I can get that much Endo for this. But an unslotted Ayatan's treasure will only net you 2,000 pretty much. These stars right here, the Ayatan stars, these are used to slot for the Ayatan sculptures. So the Ayatan sculptures are a bit different in they'll move if you put more Ayatan, if you put the Ayatan Cyan star and the Ayatan Amber star inside the slots on this, you can get them to move pretty much like this. And if they're not moving, they're inactive. Nothing's going to work. And naturally, if you put it inside these, they'll move, and it'll increase the Endo cost. So if you ever need Endo and you're in need of it, just visit Maru at her bazaar, which is on Mars. You can visit her there, and you can sell the Ayatan sculptures to her for Endo. But remember, the Ayatan sculptures you want to sell, just make sure that you slot these first. You can't do it beforehand. Just make sure you slot these first, then give these to her, then you can sell them off. So that's pretty much it in its entirety for the warframes, the weapons, and the mods themselves. Because I know in reality it's difficult to really figure out where or what you need to work on, especially in terms of what you need to do in terms of warframe. But over time, I try to be more descriptive and a bit more, you know, forgiving in how to do certain things. Because I know some people have a hard time understanding how to do certain things. And if you guys haven't done so yet, try doing the alerts whenever they pop, which I am going to do. As a matter of fact, before I do that, and I'm going to be working on that more, I'm not going to go in with the Tatsu. What did I have? See, I don't have it. Well, I can make these weapons again, but I'm not too torn up about having them. Let's see. Oh yeah, what the heck was it? Cause I need to level. Yeah, the crush guy. I need to finish leveling that up. I'm doing the ambassador. Put that back on. Keeping the infesto. Actually, I think the next thing I would talk about. Huh. I'm a little torn on what I can talk about next. I mean, I know I did, I think I know what I want to talk about next. I think for the next one, I'm going to actually hunt down and show you how to fight Kuva Lich. But let me do this to finish it off. Because I'm not intending to stay on much longer at all, but in case you guys didn't know, we don't have true crossplay yet because we still can't do certain things in the game. I mean, we just have standard crossplay, and things are still getting still getting sorted, and we're still stress testing certain things. But I know the next thing I am going to do is the next thing I'm going to do is focus more on, well, I believe the next update I have, or the next update to my channel I will have, is pretty much Verona in her entirety. And I can't believe I didn't bring, it doesn't matter. I wasn't planning on a stand. Well, I only want to do this because I want to get the, I just want to get the, I want to get the actual rewards from this. And yeah, I know this weapon is highly inaccurate, but it's nothing I can't handle. Because the weapon itself already had 110. It had 110 accuracy, which should be impossible because the accuracy should only reach up to 100%.
I'm detecting a large security force heading your way. It's the Grineer.
Somebody hunting them.
Stay focused. There's a heavy unit.
Yeah, I'm just taking these guys out. Yeah, because a lot of stuff that I have on her actually is pretty good. So pretty much the next update you'll probably see from me is definitely going to be, definitely from Verona, which is another 20-minute survival. Yeah, a 20-minute survival that I got planned. The one thing I normally do with my survivals is I make sure that the actual Warframe itself is maxed out. Because I don't like to fight against enemies with a Warframe that isn't even maxed at all. Because I know we recently got 2 more Tenet weapons in our arsenals. We got the Tenet Ferox and the Tenet Plinks. Oh, and before anything else, one thing you guys want to do is make sure you read the weapon descriptions on certain things. For example, I haven't did it yet, but for this weapon, it has a secondary function, and the secondary function for this weapon is that it can be a sniper rifle itself. So some weapons do have a secondary fire, so it's best to read the descriptions of the weapons so you understand. For example, this is what I'm going to do. Alright, now that I got the weapon itself in sniper form, I could deal a huge chunk of damage, but it will spend half my magazine. And it's a charge. thing about this weapon is that it actually has a blast radius in it. So remember before when I said to that not to worry about too much about how the weapon fires at first? You want to pay close attention to the stats on the weapon because each weapon has a different stat in different categories in different modes. So if it has, one thing to check for the weapon, especially if the weapon itself is something that you have, you want to check to see if there's any additional information on the weapon itself. So if the weapon looks like it has more to it, there could be other things that the weapon itself could specialize in. Like, the weapon itself may have a secondary fire where it would eject an entire magazine and set it up as sort of like a turret. Another may set it up as another may have it set up as where it can switch different fire rates and whatnot. And in the rate I said, well, in the way that I said before, it may function differently based on what type of again, it'll change, effects, such as it'll have an additional puncture effect, or it will have a what else will it have? Oh yeah, it will also gain different it will gain different properties, such as you'll be able to add more rounds to it, or it'll deal an additional proc of a certain damage type, like radiation or electricity, anything like that. Yeah, this person's using it. Yeah, that's a tenant weapon. So what the heck are you guys doing? I did plan on helping a friend tomorrow with certain stuff. That dude was slow.
Marines inbound.
Great.
Sentry gun incoming.
Oh, deploying air support
Many
charge.
things
All right.
have been taken from us, it's true. But fortune favors the bold, and there ain't none so bold as people with nothing to lose.
All right. What the hell?
Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching.
But yeah, overall, I'd say take some time, study some of the damage types, study what how each weapon, works in different ways. And don't forget to study the different types of stats each weapon has. That way you have a better idea on what you need to work on and whether or not certain weapons will work against certain enemies. And don't forget to bring plenty of a resource that you bring plenty of a resource that you actually need. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just confused, but yeah. You want to pay attention to the type of mods there are out there, and pay attention to certain stats. The thing was, I didn't talk more into specific stat types because some of them are hidden stat types, some of them are not. Like in some cases, I didn't talk about, you know, the microwave status type because it doesn't really affect anything in its entirety. It just deforms certain enemies. But certain things such as punch through and anything like that, that's more intricate. That's more intricate stuff that's a bit more to understand, which is why I want people to, well, not want, which is why I try to educate people on certain status types in the game to let them get used to certain stuff. So beyond that, there really isn't much left to learn about this. Okay, so I know this guy is outside of his, yeah. Yeah, Custodia. Yeah, he's outside of his, Warframe. What type of Warframes do we have? I mean, we have, obviously, me, Varuna, we have Styanax, we have Ash Prime, and Excalibur. Well, Excalibur is pretty much a given because, you know, one player, well, recently started the game and he's up to Mastery rank 3. So, yeah. I'm going to focus more on, well, I'm going to focus on Varuna, and then I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to focus on her 20-minute survival first. I do need to figure out which type of enemy she works best against. I'm thinking Grineer, maybe. But then again, I've done Grineer. Well, at the beginning, I'd done a ton of Grineer. So I'm not too torn up about. Yeah, I'm not too torn up about it. I am trying to get rid of some of these guys. Just taking these guys out. I mean, we would have been through this much faster. Where's this guy at? I thought this guy would have been. Yeah, we would have been done this much sooner. But at the same time, I have been wanting to do some Void Fissure challenges. And the Void Fissure challenges is supposed to be more or less a thing that I do, where I just go through and do different. I go through with a specific loadout that some players have, or that some players choose. Yeah, the only reason I haven't done any of her, the only reason I haven't done any of her stuff but yeah, the only reason I haven't done any of her abilities is because there was no real point, because I figured we would have been just killing these dudes left, right, and center. Yeesh. Oh, I ain't got no more energy. Dang. How the hell did that happen? Normally I would have more energy than this, but alright, one more wave and it'll be over. That it. You too. Nope. This thing costs a lot of energy. Well, not a lot of energy. I don't have a high enough energy pool. Yeah, I'm just tearing these dudes down. Yeah, we're about done. How long it's gonna take? Fly, kick his ass. And that's that.
You held them all back. Time to get out of here.
well, I max ranked the Kreshka. But yeah, I think the next thing I am going to do is I will do a playthrough of the Kuva Lich to make things, just so people can see what it's like to actually fight against the Lich. At least that way, players can see firsthand what it's like to do so. But other than that, that's pretty much what I wanted to get off my chest for tonight. I know in most cases the game is actually dense in numbers, but the reason I wanted to speak up about the warframes, the weapons, and the mods is because those are the 3 core things I believe you should learn and what you should be paying attention to. That way, when you do play the game, it's a lot easier to understand some of this stuff. Because I almost quit a few times in the game because of a couple of different things. Because when I first started playing the game, and I'll speak more on this in another stream, is that when I first started playing the game, I had zero clue how to deal as much damage as I normally did, and I had no idea how to get certain, planets in the entire game. And I'm talking about before we got all of this. I'm talking about back in 2014, 2015. But beyond that, I actually learned and started picking up on exactly what these guys are putting down. I began reading. I basically relearned everything. I relearned what type of weapon I had, the type of what damage types were. I started to understand more and more about all this right here, such as range, efficiency, duration, and stuff like that. Because I figured the problem is that the reason why people haven't really given the game a full chance was because they didn't really understand all the mechanics in the game.
This is how angry.
Basically, my goal is to help fill that gap and to help people understand that even though you don't get a lot of stuff in the game, a lot of it is mostly mental, and it's more or less how you approach the game. Because the game really isn't complicated. It's just that nobody really haven't went into detail about the different aspects of how everything in this game is. And for me, I want to be that person that fills in the gaps and help people learn a few different things about the game that they otherwise wouldn't figure out beforehand. So that's my real goal in Warframe and in what I want to do in its entirety. But anyway, that's it for me. Appreciate you guys for stopping by, and if you haven't done so, be sure to check out my Guilded server, which should be in the description box below. As I'm still working on a few things. I'm still having a few things iron out, and I'm still learning how to do several things on the server itself. Because I do have a Warframe server there. So if anybody has any questions, or if there's anybody that want to give me a certain challenge or anything like that, you can do so from over there, because that's the easiest way to reach me. So until then, I'll catch you guys later.